Well, that gospel reading is filled with a lot of weird images. Sun going dark, Son of Man on the clouds. But, I want to tell you this morning that if you really pay attention to these images and begin to understand their background, you'll discover that Jesus has good news for us today, especially when we go through difficult times. There are times when good things happen, and there are times when difficult things happen. There are good things that happen in our lives, like yesterday. I hope you got outside, walked among the beauty of the colors in the trees. Did you get out yesterday? I hope so, because it's so beautiful out. So when we have a day like that, or we gather with friends, we feel joy and give thanks. But how do we handle difficult times, hard times? There's the stress and worry of everyday life. How will I pay all these bills? Rising prices. I worry about the health of my parents. We worry about our children and our grandchildren. And then there is the experience of losing people we love. Just 2 weeks ago, a figure in our neighborhood, a woman that seems to know everybody, and was at every kid's event, just died at her desk at work. So we suffer death, and when we feel that, we know the ache and emptiness of loss. And then there are times when we are afraid. There are neighborhoods in the D.C. region where people are afraid of getting shot. They're afraid of getting robbed. And then there are real situations of chaos and violence, like what our brothers and sisters in Haiti are going through, or in parts of Mexico, or many other parts of the world. And when these kinds of events happen, we can feel alone. We can feel overwhelmed and weighed down. So does our faith have anything to say to these experiences? Does our faith offer us a way to handle difficult times? Well, I think today's gospel, despite the weird images, actually offers us hope and consolation during those hard times. Let me explain. First, let's get the scene straight. This passage is part of a larger passage in Mark chapter 13. And Jesus and his disciples are walking out of the temple of Jerusalem. And the disciples are looking at this magnificent, majestic building with these beautiful stones. Remember, these are country bumpkins from farmland Galilee. And they are blown away by the beauty and magnificence of the Jerusalem temple. And they point this out to Jesus. You see, the temple in Jerusalem, there was only one. It was the center of Jewish religious life. It was the center of their political and economic life. It was the Holy of Holies. It was where heaven and earth met. And as they are speaking about the beauty and all of the temple, Jesus says something to them that shocks them to their core. He predicts the destruction of this very temple. Here's what he says. You see these great buildings? Not a single stone will be left on another. Everything will be pulled down. Because Jesus believed that eventually the Romans would come and surround the temple and destroy the temple and the center of Jewish life. And in 66 AD, his prediction came true. And if you go to Jerusalem today, you can go to the western wall and go to the southwest corner, and you'll see archaeologists have excavated piles of the stones that used to be up on the temple wall that the Romans had knocked down. They leave the temple area, cross the Kidron Valley, they go up onto the Mount of Olives, and now they're looking back at the temple that Jesus just predicted would be destroyed. And does he offer his disciples any hope? Well, kind of. He warns them that the coming of the kingdom will involve birth pains. Now, if you gave birth in the first century Galilee, there was no epidural. There was no painkiller. It would have been very, very hard to endure. And Jesus says the coming of the kingdom is going to endure birth pains. You need to be realistic. There will be opposition and confrontation from the nations, from within the church, from within your families. And he warns his disciples, you guys could be arrested, dragged before the courts of the synagogues, all for my name. So be realistic. And then he says, the sun will go dark, the moon won't shine its light, and the stars will fall. Now, he doesn't think the stars are going to fall. He doesn't think the sun's going to go dark. This is metaphor. But it's metaphor for the most earth-shattering and cataclysmic events. And there is nothing more earth-shattering or cataclysmic or devastating for Jesus' disciples than the destruction of the temple. Now, he doesn't just leave them there. He does offer them some hope. Now, I hope none of us goes through these kinds of devastating events that first century Jews went through. But we just went through COVID. And all of us go through difficult times and carry our burdens. So what hope does Jesus offer us and his disciples? Well, the first thing is this. As they're sitting there on the Mount of Olives, Jesus says this to them. You will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power. Oh, well, that's good. As if we know what that means. Now, first of all, this is not about divine space travel. This is a reference to chapter 7 of the book of Daniel. I encourage you to read this chapter. It's an extraordinary chapter in which the prophet is looking at one pagan empire after another. The Babylonians, the Persians, the Assyrians, the Greeks, and the Romans who have crushed the Jews. And God pronounces judgment on them. And then a human being is carried into the throne room of heaven, this Son of Man. And then God confers on him the power to rule the world and all of the nations. And so Daniel is saying to his Jewish contemporaries, one day these nations won't crush us, but God will send his agent to rule the world. So when Jesus is saying the Son of Man is coming, that's Jewish speak for, I am the Messiah. I am the King. Even though there's going to be difficulties and struggles and pain, you are with me, and I am the one who will eventually rule all things. This is the one that we devote our lives to. No matter what happens to you, no matter what struggles you go through, when you're overwhelmed and feel alone, and the forces of the world seem too much, remember, we worship the true King, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And then Jesus says one more thing to help his disciples and to help us. He says that he will send the Spirit to gather us around him and in him. So no matter what you're going through, no matter how lost or lonely or sad you feel, remember that Jesus is always sending his Spirit to gather you and us into himself. This will happen fully and finally when he comes in the end times. But in the meantime, right now, today, my friends, he is gathering all of us into his beautiful and kind presence. That's why you're here. We're all here because the Spirit of God has called us to gather around him at the altar. Right now, he is calling you to himself, to his peace and love. Right now, he wants to gather all of us into his kind presence. And you know, when you gather with good friends and family and feel fulfilled and feel a sense of peace and joy, that too is an event in which he's gathering you into himself. He always wants to gather us into his kind presence, especially when we go through difficult things. so that we, like his disciples, can sit with him. Wouldn't you want to sit with him on the Mount of Olives? To spend time with him, especially when you're going through struggles. That's what he offers us. So no matter what, he is the King of Kings, and he keeps inviting us to be with him. So my friends, this morning, say yes to that invitation as he gathers us into himself so that you can discover his peace.